I'm not the kind of guy who believes in monsters. Hell, I've been hunting the backcountry of northern Wyoming for almost 15 years. And the biggest thing I ever worried about was a mountain lion, or maybe getting lost in a sudden blizzard. But what happened to me and my buddies in late October changed everything. I'm telling this story because people need to know what's really out there in the deep wilderness. The official report says it was a cougar attack, but that's a lie. Cats don't plan. Cats don't hunt humans like we're prey, and they sure as hell don't seal you in a cave to die. It was Ryan who pitched the idea. Late-season elk hunt, deep into Pine Ridge Wilderness, a stretch of northern Wyoming so remote that most hunters won't touch it. The terrain's brutal, all steep ridges and half-collapsed fire roads from the 80s. There's an old ranger outpost about 8 miles in, been abandoned since before I was born. Ryan had pulled some coordinates off an old forestry map he found at a garage sale, claimed there was a valley past the outpost where elk congregated before the first heavy snow. Luke and I were skeptical, but Ryan had that look in his eye, the one that said he was going whether we came or not. So we packed our gear, drove out to the trailhead on a gray Thursday morning, and started hiking. The woods felt wrong from the start, but I told myself it was just the weather. Heavy clouds, air so still you could hear your own heartbeat. We didn't see another soul on the trail, not one. By midday, we'd passed the outpost. Roof caved in, windows shattered, door hanging crooked like a broken jaw. Something about that place made my skin crawl, but I didn't say anything. We pushed another 3 miles past it and set up camp near a frozen beaver pond, tucked into a stand of lodgepole pines. The silence out there wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of silence that makes you whisper without knowing why. That first night, nothing happened. We built a fire, ate freeze-dried chili, talked about past hunts. Luke joked that we'd probably hike all this way just to get skunked. Ryan laughed. I didn't. I kept looking at the tree line, feeling like something was looking back. I didn't sleep much that night, and when I did, I dreamed of footsteps circling the tent, slow, deliberate, just outside the nylon walls. The next morning, Ryan found the tracks. Ryan found them about a quarter-mile from camp, down by a muddy creek bed where the ground was still soft from yesterday's melt. He radioed us over, voice tight, and when Luke and I got there, we just stood there staring. They were footprints. Human-shaped, anyway, but massive, easily 17, maybe 18 inches long. The toes were spread wide, like whoever made them had been walking barefoot through cold mud, and the impressions were deep, real deep. Whatever left these weighed a hell of a lot more than any man I'd ever met. "Bear?" Luke offered, crouching down beside one. But even as he said it, I could hear the doubt in his voice. "Bears don't walk on 2 legs for this long," Ryan said, pointing down the creek. The tracks continued in a steady line for at least 60 yards, then looped back in a wide circle, like something had been pacing, deliberate, methodical. I didn't like that at all. Luke pulled out his phone and snapped a few pictures, then measured one print with his hand. His palm didn't even cover half of it. He'd been guiding hunts in Montana and Wyoming for over a decade, seen just about every kind of animal track you could imagine. He looked up at us with this expression I'd never seen on him before. Not quite fear, but close. Uncertainty, maybe. That shook me more than the prints themselves. "Could be a hoax," I said, trying to convince myself more than them. "Some jackass in custom boots trying to scare hunters." "Out here?" Ryan gestured around at the endless forest. "We haven't seen another person in 2 days, Jake." "And look," he pointed at the depth of the print, the way the mud had been compressed and pushed up around the edges. "You'd need to weigh 300 pounds minimum to make an impression like that. And the stride length?" He paced it out. "Nearly 6 feet between steps." We followed the prints for a while, upstream toward a cluster of mossy boulders. They circled a flat area near the water, then vanished into the rocky ground where the soil was too hard to leave marks. It looked like whatever it was had stood there for a long time, just watching the creek, maybe, or waiting. That's when I noticed something else. Scratches on one of the boulders. Long, deep gouges in the stone, running parallel like claw marks. Except they were too uniform, too precise, almost deliberate. I ran my fingers over them and felt my stomach drop. They were fresh. No lichen growing in the grooves, no weathering. "We should head back," Luke said quietly. He wasn't looking at the scratches. He was looking past them, up into the forest where the trees grew thick and the shadows pooled like black water. I followed his gaze but saw nothing. Still, the feeling was there, that electric prickle on the back of your neck when you know you're being watched. Ryan wanted to keep tracking, see if we could figure out what we were dealing with. Luke and I voted him down. We hiked back to camp in silence, each of us scanning the woods, hands resting a little too close to our rifle straps. The wind had picked up, pushing clouds across the sun, and the temperature was dropping fast. That night we kept the fire high. We took turns on watch that night, though none of us admitted we were scared. Ryan had first shift. Luke took midnight to 3, and I drew the pre-dawn hours. I tried to sleep during Ryan's watch but couldn't. I just lay there in my sleeping bag, listening to the fire crackle and the wind move through the pines. Around 11, I heard the first click. It was sharp, deliberate, like two rocks being struck together. Once, twice, then silence. I sat up, saw Ryan by the fire, head tilted, listening. He looked over at me, and I knew he'd heard it too. We waited, barely breathing, but it didn't come again. After a few minutes, he shrugged, and I lay back down. Probably just the fire popping, I told myself, or a branch snapping somewhere in the cold. But I knew better. That sound had been too clean, too purposeful. When Luke took over at midnight, I was still awake. I listened to Ryan's breathing slow and deepen beside me, envied him for it. Then, maybe 20 minutes into Luke's shift, the clicking started again. This time it was closer, definitely outside the firelight, somewhere in the trees to our left. Click, click, pause. Click, click, click. Like Morse code, except it meant nothing. Just noise designed to get our attention. Luke stood up, grabbed his flashlight, and swept the beam across the tree line. Nothing but darkness and pine trunks. The clicking stopped the moment the light came on. He kept the beam up for a solid minute, panning slowly back and forth, then finally lowered it. I saw his jaw working, grinding his teeth the way he did when he was thinking hard about something he didn't want to say out loud. Then came the hum. Low, vibrating, almost subsonic. I felt it in my chest before I actually heard it. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, drifting through the forest like something alive. It would swell, hold for a few seconds, then fade completely. Then it would start again, but from a different direction. East, then south, then somewhere behind us. Moving too fast, way too fast. That woke Ryan up. He unzipped his tent and crawled out, rifle in hand, face pale in the firelight. "What the hell is that?" "I don't know," Luke said quietly. He was still standing, still scanning the woods, but his hand was shaking slightly where it gripped the flashlight. I'd never seen Luke rattled, not once in all the years I'd known him. The humming continued for maybe 10 minutes, circling us, getting closer and then farther away, playing with distance like it was testing how we'd react. Then it just stopped. Complete silence. Even the wind died. No insects, no nightbirds, nothing. Just the pop and hiss of our campfire, and the three of us standing there like idiots, armed and useless. "We're leaving at first light," Luke said. It wasn't a suggestion. Ryan started to argue, but I cut him off. "He's right. Something's not right out here. We stayed up together the rest of the night, feeding the fire, keeping it bright. None of us said much. We didn't have to. Around 4 a.m., just before dawn started graying the sky, I walked to the edge of camp to piss. That's when I saw them. Tracks. Fresh ones. Circling our entire campsite in a wide loop, maybe 30 feet out, just beyond where our firelight reached. The same massive prints from the creek bed, only now there were dozens of them, overlapping in places, like whatever made them had walked around us again and again while we sat there by the fire. I didn't tell the others right away. I stood there in the pre-dawn cold, staring at those prints, and felt something shift in my gut. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't some animal passing through. This was deliberate. I showed them the tracks as soon as there was enough light to see clearly. Ryan crouched down, ran his hand along the edge of one print, then stood up without saying a word. Luke just stared, his face unreadable. We packed up camp in silence, moving fast, glancing over our shoulders every few seconds. The plan was simple. Hike back the way we came, get to the truck, and get the hell out. But Ryan had other ideas. He wanted to move higher, up into the rocky terrain where we'd have better visibility, better defensible positions. Whatever this thing is, he said, it's using the forest, stalking us. We get above the tree line, we'll see it coming. I didn't like it, but Luke agreed. Higher ground made tactical sense, even if it meant staying out here another night. So we shouldered our packs and started climbing, leaving the frozen beaver pond behind. The terrain got rougher fast. Loose scree, steep granite faces, patches of old snow that crunched under our boots. By mid-afternoon, we'd gained maybe 1,000 feet in elevation and found a decent spot to set up. A rocky shelf with our backs to a cliff face and a clear view of the forest below. While Ryan and Luke pitched the tents, I scouted the immediate area. That's when I found it. There was a split in the rock wall, narrow, almost invisible unless you were looking for it. I squeezed through and found myself in a small hollow, maybe 10 feet deep and twice as wide. The smell hit me first, damp earth, rot, something else I couldn't place. Then I saw what was inside. Branches, hundreds of them, stacked deliberately in the back corner, woven together in a loose structure that might have been a nest or a shelter. Scattered around the floor were bones, deer, elk, smaller animals I couldn't identify, all of them picked completely clean, some of them snapped in half for the marrow. Scraps of hide were piled against one wall, stiff and dried. But it was the marks on the stone that made my blood go cold. Scratches, deep, parallel gouges carved into the rock, running in patterns across the back wall. They weren't random. Some formed rough geometric shapes, circles, lines, crosses. Others looked almost like tally marks, grouped in 5s and 10s. I stood there staring at them, trying to make sense of it, and couldn't. Animals don't mark territory like this. Animals don't count. I backed out of the hollow slowly, my heart hammering, and nearly ran straight into Luke. "Jesus, Jake!" He stopped when he saw my face. "What's wrong?" I told him. He squeezed into the crevice, stayed for maybe 30 seconds, then came back out, looking like he'd aged 5 years. "We're not staying here," he said flatly. But it was already late afternoon, and the nearest viable campsite was hours away through rough country. Ryan argued we'd be safer here, high up with our backs protected, than stumbling through the forest in the dark. He had a point. Reluctantly, Luke and I agreed to stay put, but we moved our camp 100 yards from the crevice, built the fire big, and kept our rifles loaded. As the sun set, the forest below us went quiet again. That same unnatural silence, like something had cleared out every living thing for miles. I kept thinking about those marks on the wall, deliberate, intentional, the work of something that could think, plan, remember. Ryan tried to lighten the mood, cracking jokes about Bigfoot and asking if we'd get rich off the book deal. Luke didn't laugh. Neither did I. We just sat there, feeding the fire, watching the darkness gather in the valleys below. Around 9, we heard the voices. Distant at first, echoing up from somewhere deep in the forest. Human voices, or something close. Laughter, maybe. Fragments of speech that almost sounded like words, but were just slightly wrong, stretched and distorted. They seemed to come from multiple directions at once, bouncing off the rocks, making it impossible to pinpoint a source. Luke stood up, rifle ready. "That's not real," he said quietly, but his voice was shaking. The sounds continued for maybe 20 minutes, circling us, playing with echoes. Once, I swear I heard my own name, Jake, drawn out long and mocking. Then it all stopped, and the silence rushed back in, like water filling a grave. None of us slept that night. Dawn came slow and gray, the sky choked with clouds that threatened snow. We broke camp without discussion, barely spoke as we packed our gear. The plan now was simple. Get down off this mountain, stick to open ground as much as possible, and make for the trailhead. No more detours. No more investigations. We started moving just after sunrise, picking our way down a rocky slope toward a ridgeline that would take us east, away from the dense forest. The terrain was exposed, just low scrub and scattered boulders, but that was exactly what we wanted. Visibility. No cover for anything to sneak up on us. We'd been hiking maybe an hour when Ryan stopped dead. "There," he said, voice barely above a whisper. I followed his gaze to the ridgeline ahead, about 300 yards out. At first I didn't see it, just rocks and sky and the dark line of trees beyond. Then it moved, a shape, tall, upright, standing perfectly still on the ridge, silhouetted against the gray morning sky. It was massive, at least 7 feet, maybe more. The proportions were wrong, though. Arms too long, hanging past where the knees should be. Shoulders too wide. The way it stood there, completely motionless, reminded me of a mantis, alien, patient, watching. "Is that a person?" Ryan's voice cracked slightly. Luke already had his rifle scope up. He stared through it for a long moment, then lowered the gun slowly. His face had gone pale. "No," he said, "that's not a person." We stood there frozen, watching it watch us. It didn't hide, didn't move, just stood there on that ridgeline, like it wanted us to see it, wanted us to know it was there. The distance made details impossible, but I could see enough. The way it held itself, the slight forward hunch, the deliberate stillness. Then, slowly, it turned and walked along the ridge, not away from us, parallel, matching our direction. The gait was wrong, too smooth, almost mechanical. Each step covered too much ground. "We need to move," Luke said, "now." We started hiking again, faster now, eyes locked on that ridgeline. The shape kept pace with us, never getting closer, never falling behind. Just tracking us. After maybe 10 minutes, it stopped and stood there again, watching. That's when I saw the others. Movement along the tree line to our left. Another shape, partially obscured by pines, also upright, also too tall. Then a third, farther south, emerging from behind a boulder and standing in the open. They were coordinating, flanking us. "They're hurting us," Luke said, his voice tight. Ryan swung his rifle toward the nearest shape. "I can take a shot." "No," Luke snapped. "We don't know what they are. We don't know how many. We just need to keep moving and get to lower ground." But there was a problem. The terrain ahead funneled into a narrow ravine, steep walls on both sides, the only path down unless we wanted to backtrack miles. And backtracking meant going toward the shapes behind us. We didn't have a choice. We entered the ravine at a half-run, boots slipping on loose rock, packs bouncing. The walls rose up on either side, maybe 20 feet high, cutting off our view of everything except the strip of sky above. I hated it immediately. Trapped, channeled, exactly where something smart would want us. Halfway through, Luke stopped, held up a fist. We froze. Ahead, maybe 50 yards, something was blocking the exit. Another shape. Closer now. Close enough to see details I wish I hadn't. It was hunched forward slightly, knuckles almost brushing the ground. Covered in dark, matted hair. The face, God, the face, was too flat, too wide, with eyes set deep under a heavy brow. It didn't look away, didn't blink, just stared at us with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. Behind us, I heard movement, rocks shifting, the scrape of something heavy dragging across stone. We were boxed in. Ryan brought his rifle up, hands shaking. "We have to shoot. We have to—" The creature at the ravine exit moved, fast, impossibly fast. It covered half the distance between us in 3 strides, and that's when everything went to hell. Luke fired first. The crack of the rifle echoed off the stone walls, deafening. I saw the impact, saw the creature jerk, dark spray across its shoulder, but it didn't go down. It didn't even slow, just kept coming with this low, guttural sound that wasn't quite a roar, wasn't quite a scream. Ryan fired. I fired. At least one shot hit center mass, but the thing just staggered and kept moving. Luke was shouting something, but I couldn't hear over the gunfire and the blood rushing in my ears. Then I heard Ryan scream. I turned and saw another one behind us, must have come over the ravine wall. It had Ryan by the pack, lifting him off the ground. He was kicking, clawing, still holding his rifle but unable to aim. The creature slammed him into the rock wall. Once. Twice. The third impact made a sound I'll never forget. Wet, crunching, final. Ryan went limp. Luke grabbed my arm and yanked me backward, screaming something I couldn't process. My eyes were locked on Ryan's body, crumpled against the rocks, head twisted at an angle that wasn't possible. The creature dropped him like garbage and turned toward us. Luke fired twice more, both shots hitting the thing in the chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. Just kept coming with that horrifying, rolling gait. "Run!" Luke shoved me hard, and suddenly I was moving, scrambling over rocks, my pack slamming against my back. We ran deeper into the ravine, away from both creatures, looking for any gap in the walls, any way out. Behind us I could hear them, heavy footfalls, the scrape of claws on stone, that low vocalization that sounded almost like speech. There, a split in the left wall, narrow but passable. Luke saw it at the same time I did, and we dove through, squeezing between stone, packs catching and scraping. The gap opened into a steep slope covered in loose scree, and we half ran, half fell down it, rocks cascading around us. At the bottom was thick forest. We crashed through it, branches whipping our faces, no thought except distance. I don't know how long we ran. Could have been 10 minutes, could have been an hour. My lungs were burning, legs screaming. But every time I thought about stopping, I saw Ryan's head snap back against that wall and kept moving. Luke pulled up behind a fallen log, gasping for air. I collapsed beside him, tasted copper in my mouth, realized I'd bitten my tongue. We sat there heaving, listening. Forest sounds, wind, branches creaking, normal sounds. But I didn't trust them anymore. "Did we lose them?" I managed to gasp out. Luke just shook his head. Not no, more like, I don't know. His hands were shaking as he checked his rifle, counted his remaining rounds. His face was gray, streaked with sweat despite the cold. "Ryan's dead," I said. Saying it out loud made it real, made it permanent. "I know." Luke's voice was flat, empty. "We need to find shelter. Somewhere we can defend. We're not making it back to the trailhead today. Not in the dark. Not with those things hunting us." I wanted to argue, wanted to say we should just keep running, but he was right. We were exhausted, disoriented, and dusk was already starting to gray the sky. Moving through this forest at night would be suicide. We found it maybe 20 minutes later, the entrance to an old mining tunnel, partially collapsed but still accessible, cut into the side of a rocky hillside. The opening was low and narrow, reinforced with rotting timbers that looked ready to give way any second. Luke shined his flashlight inside. The tunnel ran back maybe 30 feet before ending in a cave-in, old rusted equipment scattered on the floor. It wasn't ideal, but it was defensible. Single entrance, solid rock walls. We could see anything coming. We crawled inside, pulled our packs in after us, and set up near the back. No fire. We couldn't risk the light or smoke giving away our position. We sat in the dark, rifles across our laps, listening to our own breathing and the slow drip of water somewhere deeper in the collapsed section. "They were coordinating," Luke said quietly after a while. "Did you see that? They flanked us, drove us into that ravine on purpose." I had seen it. I'd been trying not to think about it. "And the gunshots barely fazed them," he continued. "I hit that thing at least 3 times, center mass. It should have been dead." I didn't have an answer for that. Didn't have an answer for any of this. We sat in silence for a long time, watching the pale square of dying light at the tunnel entrance. As darkness settled outside, I started to relax slightly. Maybe we'd lost them. Maybe they'd given up. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, moving slowly across the hillside above us. Luke heard it too. He clicked off his flashlight, and we sat there in absolute darkness, listening. The footsteps circled, came closer to the tunnel entrance, then stopped. Silence. Long, stretching silence that made my ears ring. Then came the scraping. Something was dragging across the rock just outside the tunnel entrance. Slow, methodical, like fingers testing the stone, feeling the opening, memorizing it. It went on for maybe 2 minutes, then stopped. More silence. Then the footsteps moved away, up the hillside, fading into the distance. We didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there in the dark, waiting for dawn, knowing that whatever was out there now knew exactly where we were. And for some reason I couldn't explain, I had the terrible feeling it was letting us hide. For now. We lasted until maybe 4 a.m. before exhaustion won, and I dozed off despite myself. When I jerked awake, weak dawn light was filtering through the tunnel entrance, and Luke was already up, sitting with his rifle aimed at the opening, eyes bloodshot and unfocused. "Anything?" I whispered. He shook his head. Quiet all night after that, whatever that was. His voice was hoarse, scraped, raw. We waited until full daylight, then crept to the tunnel entrance and looked out. The hillside was empty. No movement. No tracks visible in the rocky ground. Birds were even singing, tentatively, like they weren't quite sure it was safe yet. "We make for the trailhead," Luke said. "Fast and direct. No stopping." I nodded. My whole body ached. My head pounded from dehydration. But adrenaline would carry me. It had to. We'd barely made it 100 yards from the tunnel when the first rock hit. It slammed into the ground maybe 10 feet to my left, a stone the size of a football, hitting with enough force to crack on impact. I spun, looking for the source, and saw movement on the ridge above us, 2 of them, upright, silhouetted against the morning sky. Another rock whistled past my head. Then another, coming from a different angle. They were above us on both sides, driving us downhill, away from the direction we wanted to go. "They're doing it again!" I shouted. Luke didn't answer, just ran, and I followed. Rocks crashed around us, some missing by inches, others hitting trees and exploding into fragments. We were being herded again, pushed toward lower ground, where the terrain narrowed into a natural corridor of stone, high walls on both sides, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side. I knew it was a trap before we entered it, but we had no choice. The alternative was staying exposed and getting our skulls caved in by thrown rocks. The corridor ran maybe 60 yards, curving slightly so you couldn't see the far end. Our footsteps echoed off the stone walls, too loud, too exposed. I kept looking back, expecting to see them pouring in behind us, but the entrance remained empty. We were halfway through when I saw it blocking the exit. Same massive shape, same impossible proportions, standing perfectly still in the narrow gap, waiting. Luke raised his rifle, but before he could fire, I heard something behind us. Heavy footfalls, coming fast. I turned and saw another one charging into the corridor, moving with terrifying speed. But this one was carrying something. A broken tree trunk, thick as my torso, hoisting it like a club. "Luke!" I screamed. He spun, fired twice. Both shots hit. I saw the impacts, saw dark spray, but the creature didn't stop. It closed the distance in seconds and swung that trunk like a baseball bat. Luke tried to dodge, almost made it. The impact caught him across the chest and shoulder, lifted him off his feet, and slammed him into the stone wall with a sound I'll hear until the day I die. He crumpled, rifle clattering away, and didn't get up. I don't remember deciding to run. My body just moved. I saw a crack in the right wall, narrow, barely a gap, squeezed through it as the creature swung again, the tree trunk smashing into rock inches behind me. The crack was tight, cutting my arms and face as I forced myself through, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. I burst out the other side into a small clearing, stumbled, fell, scrambled back to my feet. Behind me I could hear them, trying to follow through the crack, too big to fit, making frustrated sounds that were almost words. I ran. Didn't look back. Didn't think about Luke. Couldn't think about Luke, or I'd stop and curl up and die right there. The forest blurred around me. I have no idea how long I ran or what direction. At some point I realized I'd lost my pack, lost my rifle, lost everything except the knife on my belt and the clothes on my back. Didn't matter. Nothing mattered except moving. When I finally collapsed, it was near a rocky outcrop riddled with small caves and crevices. My vision was tunneling, lungs screaming, legs useless. I crawled into the nearest opening, barely large enough to fit my body, and kept crawling until I was wedged deep inside a narrow crack in the rock. And that's where I stayed, gasping in the darkness, tasting blood and dirt, while outside the sun tracked across the sky and my friends lay dead in the wilderness. I must have passed out, because when I came to, it was dark, and I could hear them outside. Footsteps. Multiple sets. Moving slowly across the rocks, methodical, searching. Then I heard the sound of stone scraping on stone. They were blocking the entrance. The scraping continued for hours. I couldn't see anything from where I was wedged deep in the crack, but I could hear it, the methodical placement of stone on stone, rocks being stacked, fitted together, building something, sealing me in. I tried to stay calm, tried to think rationally, but panic kept clawing up my throat. I was trapped in a space barely wider than my shoulders, couldn't turn around, couldn't move more than a few inches in any direction. The darkness was absolute, the kind of dark where you can't tell if your eyes are open or closed. Eventually, the scraping stopped. Silence rushed in to replace it. So complete, I could hear my own heartbeat thudding in my ears. I waited, listening for footsteps moving away, but heard nothing. Either they'd left or they were still out there, standing silent in the dark, watching, waiting. I don't know how long I stayed frozen like that. Could have been an hour, could have been 3. Time stopped meaning anything. Finally, I worked up the courage to move, inching backward toward where the entrance should be, feeling my way in the pitch black. My hand hit stone, solid rock where the opening had been. I pushed against it, didn't budge. Felt around the edges, found more stone, carefully placed, interlocked. They'd sealed it completely. The realization hit me like cold water. I was going to die in here. Slowly, in the dark, alone. I tried to scream, but my throat was too dry, too raw. What came out was more of a croak. I pounded on the rocks with my fists, accomplishing nothing except bruising my hands. The stone didn't move, didn't even shift. After a while, I stopped fighting and just lay there, trying to conserve energy, trying to think. My water bottle was long gone with my pack. I hadn't had anything to drink since yesterday morning. My tongue felt thick, sticky. I could already feel the dehydration headache building behind my eyes. The darkness pressed in from all sides. I started seeing things that weren't there, flashes of light, shapes moving at the edge of vision. I knew it was my brain misfiring, trying to make sense of sensory deprivation, but that didn't make it less terrifying. I thought about Ryan, the way his head had snapped back, the wet crunch. I thought about Luke, probably lying broken in that stone corridor, if the creatures hadn't already dragged him off. I thought about my sister, who'd probably never know what really happened out here. The official report would say bear attack, or exposure, or some other lie that made sense to people who'd never seen what I'd seen. Time became meaningless. I slipped in and out of consciousness, dreams and reality blending together. Once I woke, convinced I could hear digging, rock being moved, but when I focused, the sound disappeared. Hallucination, my mind playing tricks. The thirst got worse. My lips cracked and bled. I tried licking condensation off the stone walls, but there wasn't enough to matter. I thought about the knife on my belt, thought about ending it quick rather than dying slow, but couldn't quite bring myself to do it. Some stupid, stubborn part of me still hoped. I have no idea how long I was in there. Felt like days, but might have been less. Might have been more. I stopped being able to tell when I was awake and when I was dreaming. Started having conversations with people who weren't there. Saw Ryan standing at the end of the crack, whole and alive, telling me to hold on. Saw Luke saying it wasn't my fault. At some point I realized I was dying. Really dying. My heartbeat had become irregular, fluttering. My thoughts were scattered, nonsensical. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. That's when I heard it. Faint, distant, the sound of stone moving. At first I thought it was another hallucination, but then I felt it. A breath of air, cool and fresh, touching my face. I forced my eyes open, saw the faintest suggestion of light. Gray, dim, but there. Someone was moving the rocks. I tried to call out, but couldn't make a sound. Tried to move toward the light, but my body wouldn't respond. I just lay there, watching that tiny sliver of gray grow wider, stone by stone. It took maybe 20 minutes before the gap was large enough. Not fully cleared, just enough space for a person to squeeze through if they really tried. Then the moving stopped. Footsteps retreated. Silence. I waited, shaking, confused. Why would they dig me out just to leave? Finally, using the last of my strength, I dragged myself toward that gap. Squeezed through, scraping skin, not caring. Emerged into weak afternoon light and collapsed on the rocks outside. The entrance wasn't fully unblocked, just partially, deliberately. like they'd removed exactly enough stone to let me escape, and no more. I lay there gasping, too weak to move, staring at the sky. They'd let me go. I don't know how long I lay there on those rocks, staring up at the sky, trying to make sense of what had happened. My body felt like it belonged to someone else, distant, numb, barely functional. But slowly, painfully, reality started seeping back in. They'd let me out, removed just enough stone for me to escape. Why? The question circled in my head, but I had no answer. And I wasn't going to wait around to find out. I forced myself to sit up, head swimming, vision blurring. Every muscle screamed. My lips were split and bleeding, tongue swollen. I needed water, needed shelter, needed to move. I stumbled to my feet, using the rocks for support, and looked around. The sun was low, maybe an hour from sunset. I had no idea where I was, no map, no compass, no gear. Just the clothes on my back and the knife on my belt. But I knew one thing. I had to go downhill. Water flows down. Civilization is down. I started walking. More like staggering, really. Every step was agony. But I kept moving. Had to. The forest around me seemed different now. Quieter, emptier, like something had cleared out. I didn't see any tracks, didn't hear any movement, but the feeling of being watched never left. After maybe an hour, I found a small stream, barely a trickle between rocks. I dropped to my knees and drank. Didn't care that the water was probably full of giardia or worse. I drank until my stomach hurt, until I could feel it sloshing inside me. Then splashed my face, tried to wash some of the blood and dirt away. That's when I noticed my hands. The bruising from pounding on the rocks had turned my knuckles purple and black. But there was something else. Scratches on my forearms, thin and parallel, almost like the marks I'd seen carved into the stone. I didn't remember getting them. Didn't remember anything after being sealed in except darkness and hallucinations. I forced myself to keep moving. The stream became a creek. The creek joined a larger flow. I followed it downstream as the light failed, stumbling over rocks, catching myself on trees. My legs gave out twice, and both times I just lay there for a few minutes before dragging myself back up. Night fell. I kept walking. Had to. Stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant remembering Ryan's head snapping back, Luke's body crumpling against stone. Meant asking questions I couldn't answer about why I was alive when they were dead. At some point, maybe midnight, maybe later, I saw a light. Distant, flickering. Could have been another hallucination, but I moved toward it anyway. The light grew brighter, steadier. Not a fire, electric. A building. The old ranger outpost. The abandoned one we'd passed on our way in. I recognized the broken windows, the sagging roof. But there was a light on inside now, weak and yellow, visible through the gaps in the boards. I should have been terrified, should have known better, but I was too far gone to care. I stumbled toward it, pushed through the crooked door, and found myself in a single room filled with rotting furniture and broken equipment. The light was coming from a battery-powered lantern sitting on an old desk, and next to it, arranged carefully, was a water bottle. Full, sealed. I stood there swaying, staring at it, trying to make sense of this. Someone had been here, recently. Had left this for... who? Me? I grabbed the bottle, checked the seal, intact. Opened it and drank half before I could stop myself. The water was clean, cold, real. On the desk, partially hidden under the lantern, was a scrap of paper. I picked it up with shaking hands. Just 3 words, written in pencil, handwriting I didn't recognize. Keep moving. Dawn. I looked around the room, suddenly aware of how exposed I was, how visible the lantern made me. The windows were just black squares. Anything could be watching from outside. But exhaustion was winning. I couldn't take another step. I killed the lantern, moved to the corner farthest from the windows, and sat with my back against the wall, knife in hand. Just for a minute, I told myself, just until I caught my breath. I woke to pale gray light filtering through the windows and the sound of a vehicle engine. For a moment I thought I was still dreaming, but then I heard voices, human voices, real ones, calling out. Searchers. I tried to stand, couldn't, ended up crawling to the door. Pushed it open and saw 2 Park Service rangers, maybe 50 yards away, walking the old fire road. I tried to shout, but what came out was barely a whisper. Tried again, louder. One of them heard, turned, saw me. They ran over, faces shocked at the state of me. Started asking questions I couldn't answer. Where were my friends? What happened? How long had I been out here? I tried to tell them. Tried to explain about the tracks, the creatures, the deliberate hunting. But the words came out wrong, jumbled. I saw the look they exchanged. The one that said they thought I was delirious, traumatized, making things up. They found Ryan's body 3 days later, mauled beyond recognition. Luke's they found a day after that. The official report said mountain lion attack, possibly a rogue grizzly. Tragic accident, wrong place, wrong time. I told them what really happened. Told the rangers, told the investigators, told anyone who'd listen. They nodded sympathetically and wrote it all down as trauma-induced hallucinations. They kept me in the hospital for 4 days. Dehydration, exposure, malnutrition, psychological trauma. That's what the doctors called it. They ran tests, asked questions, brought in a psychiatrist who nodded thoughtfully while I described what happened, and then prescribed medication for acute stress disorder. Nobody believed me. Not the rangers, not the police, not even my own sister when she flew in from Denver. She held my hand and told me it was okay, that trauma does strange things to memory, that I'd been through something terrible, and my brain was trying to make sense of it. I stopped trying to convince them after a while. What was the point? I had no evidence, no photographs, no physical proof except some scratches on my arms that could have come from anywhere. The tracks we'd found were gone, washed away by rain or covered by snow. The den I discovered had apparently collapsed. When rangers checked the coordinates I gave them, they found only loose rock and no sign of the arrangement I'd described. Ryan's and Luke's bodies told a story the authorities wanted to believe. Animal attack, probably a large predator, maybe rabid or starving. The medical examiner noted massive trauma consistent with large carnivore. And that was that. Case closed. Tragic hunting accident. I was released on a Thursday. My sister drove me back to my apartment in Laramie, kept asking if I wanted to talk about it. I didn't. What would I say? That something intelligent hunted us through those mountains? That they coordinated, planned, trapped us like we were prey? That they sealed me in a cave and then, for reasons I still don't understand, let me go? She'd just look at me with those worried eyes and suggest I call the therapist again. I spent weeks going over it in my head, trying to make sense of what happened. The deliberate circling of our camp, the vocal mimicry, the way they herded us, trapped us, killed my friends with what looked almost like strategy, purpose, and that note in the ranger station. Keep moving. Dawn. Who left that? It wasn't the creatures. I can't imagine those things writing English. But it wasn't the rangers either. They didn't find me until hours after sunrise, and they seemed genuinely surprised I was there. Someone else was in those woods. Someone who knew what was happening. Someone who maybe left me that water, that warning, wanted me to survive. I think about that sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep. Think about why they let me go. Why they killed Ryan and Luke, but sealed me in a cave instead of just finishing me off. Were they full? Satisfied? Or was it something else, some kind of message, some purpose I'm not seeing? The scratches on my arms healed within a few weeks, leaving faint white scars. Parallel lines, like tally marks, like the ones carved into that stone wall. I haven't been back to Wyoming. Haven't been hunting at all, actually. Can't bring myself to do it. Every time I think about walking into the backcountry, I remember those shapes on the ridgeline, the intelligence in those eyes, the methodical way they took us apart. People ask me sometimes if I'm going to write a book about it, cash in on the story. I tell them no. This isn't entertainment. This isn't some campfire tale to make people shiver. Ryan's dead. Luke's dead. And I'm only alive because something up in those mountains decided to let me live. I'm telling this story now because people need to know. Not the sanitized version in the official reports, the truth. There are things in the deep wilderness that we don't understand. Things that think, plan, hunt. Things that know we're there. If you're planning a trip into remote backcountry, anywhere, not just Wyoming, you need to understand what you might be walking into. The official maps won't show you. The ranger stations won't warn you. But it's there. And sometimes, late at night, I wonder if they're still watching, still waiting. If I'm marked somehow, if those scars on my arms mean something to them. If one day they'll come back to finish what they started. Or maybe they already got what they wanted. Maybe I'm the message, the one they sent back to tell the story, the witness they chose to let live. I still don't know which possibility scares me more. If this story affected you, if you felt that cold creep up your spine, hit that subscribe button. More true encounters are coming, and trust me, you'll want to hear them. Drop a comment below and tell me, have you ever experienced something in the wilderness you couldn't explain? Something that made you realize you weren't alone? I read every comment, and some of your stories, well, they might just become the next video. Stay safe out there, and remember, just because you can't see them doesn't mean they can't see you. The official file on Pine Ridge says, animal attack. But I know what I saw. I know what hunted us, and I know they're still out there.